All right, let's do some deals. So let me start off. I always read the disclaimer for the first deal. It's important if this is your deals. I think we got Zafrina, we've got Renato, and we got Jordan up today. So those are the three deals. They're usually all on the call. I'm not sure about Jordan, but I know Zafrina and Renato are here. So if your deal's on the call, we're not really providing advice to specific individuals working on specific acquisitions. You know, it's a 20-minute discussion, 25-minute discussion. And so the purpose of this call is to observe how experienced deal makers look at new opportunities, the questions they form, and the strategies they might potentially pursue. If we were going to develop a actionable acquisition plan, it would require a lot more in-depth information on the target companies and on the sellers too than we're able to review on these calls. So a little bit of a disclaimer, right? This isn't formal advice, but a lot of the time people get some really good ideas from the discussion. So let's put together the numbers here. We'll stop 1 second on the simple model in case anybody wants to grab a screen cap of that. We'll make this a little bit bigger here on the notes. This is the Zafrina's deal. She closed one last quarter. Maybe she's going to close another one this quarter. I'll go down here and take a look at the notes. I can make this a little bit bigger. Let me get that out of the way so I can adjust the size of this because I know some people are on laptops and it is tough. So this is an accounting, tax, benefit administration, and wealth management business. And there's definitely a couple of interesting wrinkles. Customer mix, a small business and individuals. This business is located in the U.S., down in the Southwest. It was founded in 2010, so 12 years old. They trade on a regional basis. The business has been sale for 3 months, so it hasn't been listed for that long. Ask price is $3 million. That's kind of interesting. I'm going to say a little bit more in terms of how they came up with that $3 million. No property in this deal. Now, the ownership story is kind of the interesting part of this deal because it's owned by two people. Beth is 63, Ken is 49. So a big kind of age divide there right away. Beth is a baby boomer. You know, the gas tank is pretty much empty. She's had a good run. She's looking for a way out. Ken, he's only 49. So he's not necessarily in that position at all. Both of them own 50% of this business. Now, Beth is an accountant. She's a CPA, so she handles the accounting and tax side of the business. Ken is a certified financial planner. He handles the benefits and the wealth management side of the business. Like I said, Beth is burned out. She wants to exit the business. She wants to either retire, do something else, but yeah, she's just kind of sort of hit her limit, put it that way. Ken is fine with continuing the business after it is sold, so he has no problem sticking around. Now, Beth started the accounting side of this business. Ken bought the wealth management business, and then they merged the two of them together. Now, the motivation for the sale, Beth needs a change of scenery. Now, legacy is important to the sellers. They have good long-term clients who they're close to. They want to see current service levels maintained. There are 15 employees working in this business, not quite at full operating capacity, but close. Maybe room for 5% growth before you would need to add some resources. Now, the business is split pretty evenly because, Beth's taking care of accounting and tax. That's 40 plus 15. That's 55. Ken is looking after wealth management and the benefit plan. That's 45. So it's about a 55-45 split. About 85% of the revenue is repeat or recurring revenue. There is a difference between that we've talked about. To my mind, repeat business are just customers buying more than once. Recurring revenue is really all part of the same contract that generates revenue year after year after year. And so they didn't distinguish between those, but I would assume most of it is repeat type business. But on the wealth management side, some of it would be recurring as well. Now, there is an opportunity to grow the wealth management business nationally, but the fastest growing part of the business is the accounting area. Now, here's the big problem. Wealth management firms typically sell at a higher multiple than accounting firms. The typical accounting firm, they typically sell by revenue anywhere from 80% of revenue up to maybe, 125% of revenue, somewhere in there. Obviously, there are exceptions on either end of the extreme. That's sort of a typical multiple. Wealth management firms, I know Carl knows a lot about them, so I'm really interested in hearing what he has to say about this. They do sell at a much higher multiple, part of it because of that recurring revenue. Now, Beth wants most of the money up front. So an SBA deal might be possible, but then we have to deal with Ken, who doesn't necessarily want to leave and could stick around, but there's SBA rules against that as an employee. We could look at a 1099 contractor situation. Zafrina and I had a 911 call about this week. We were throwing around a bunch of ideas. One of the things I'm just going to throw in here before I throw this over to Carl, because Zafrina was saying, how do we compensate Ken, right? And this is a big problem when we have people, one staying in the business, one leaving, right? Because The person who is staying has to be compensated for the performance of the business up to this point in time. Plus, they have to be compensated for the growth of the business, going forward. So my suggestion was, and this is just conceptually for anybody here who's dealing with this, and the way I structure this when I'm working on deals where this scenario comes up, and it does fairly frequently, is you kind of have to split Ken into two people. There's seller Ken, right? And seller Ken has to be treated exactly the same as seller Beth, right? So the compensation for Ken has to be thought of as two different people. The seller Ken gets treated the same way as seller Beth, but owner Ken, going forward, gets treated exactly the same way as you do as an owner, all right? So Ken has to be treated both the same. He's supposed to compensate for the business up till now, treated the same way as Beth, and he has to be part of the business going forward, and then he's treated exactly the same as the other owners going forward. And when you do that, it's a little easier to conceptualize the compensation. Now, Beth wants most of the money up front, like I said. So we talked about SBA. Google reviews are great, 5 out of 5 on 10 reviews. I got the sense that the MUD score on this is slightly above average, which means I have a feeling Beth wants to sell this business more than the average person wants to. So Beth is feeling some real motivation. I don't think it's kind of distress, based in terms of some specific date where, things have to change for Beth. But yeah, she wants out. So I'd give it a slightly above average MUD score. And so as we can see, the SDE is pretty good in this business. There's obviously the issue of how these people are currently compensated, whether it's included, whether it isn't. If you add back the owner's salary, I'm assuming that's for both of them. If, Ken should stay, then we have to make the adjustment, etc. But I know, Carl, you know a ton about the wealth management space.
Yeah.
And so what do you think of this business? Half accounting, half wealth management.
Yeah, so this is a really solid business for sure. Having an accountancy practice that leads into wealth management is actually a really solid strategy because obviously accountants, CPAs, they're trusted by their clients. So when they're getting tax advice, etc., normally a CPA firm would send a client down the street to a wealth management firm and get a referral fee. Keeping it in-house is really, really good. In fact, I think if you own a CPA firm, acquiring a wealth management practice is a phenomenal bolt-on acquisition. So I think with this business, the wealth management piece is not enough of the revenue mix to really quantify it kind of at that level. So the biggest problem with this deal, though, it's the only problem really, is it's overvalued. There's no way that this business is worth $3 million. As we mentioned before, most businesses in the world value at a multiple of profit or a multiple of SDE, but there are some industries where multiples of revenue are more common. CPA firms, law firms, architectural practices, any kind of high-end, licensed professional services business tends to sell for a multiple of revenue, and this is what would happen. So even if if you look at a multiple of revenue, current revenue, this business will be worth 1.9, say. If you take the SDE and you add back, say, $100,000 for a GM to run the business for you, that averages out over the 3 years at about $525,000. So 3.5 multiple, which would be about right, would get you to that $1.9 million level. So I think this business is worth between 1.6 and 1.9 million. There's a little bit of a shareholder loan, so maybe there's $100,000 or a $93,000 adjustment there, which you would take into account. You'd also, Zafrina, want to look at the unearned revenue as a current liability. So that's cash that they've received, I'm guessing, that they haven't delivered the work for. So I maybe try and adjust for that as well. Plenty of cash in this business, a little bit of a lack of working capital. We normally work on 2 months revenue as working cap, so you're probably looking at around 370 or so working capital. But accounting firms tend to have a really strong cash conversion cycle, which is really, really good. And if you look at the accounts receivables, that tells the story. So normally a B2B business would be running at around 60 days. So you'd be looking at AR generally at around $350,000-$400,000. So they're getting paid very, very quickly. And what you tend to find a lot now in CPA firms is they'll tend to take a client, they'll look at the scope of work that's required over the year. Let's say, it's $5,000 or whatever of work it's likely to get billed. They'll chunk it up into a monthly payment. So the customer's just paying monthly, whether that work's getting performed or not. That's certainly what I do with my accountants, both in Australia, in England, and in the United States as well. They don't send me a big invoice at the end of the year and then I pay it on 30 days or whatever. I'm paying kind of monthly. So for that reason, a business like this won't need a lot of working capital. So I'm not worried about that. So the two issues, there's only two issues in this deal, right? One is valuation. We'll get to that in a minute. The second is how much production do these guys do in the business, right? So you've got two partners in a professional services firm. You've got Beth and Ken. I'd be interested. The first question that I would ask is, if you look at the $1.8 million worth of billing, worth of revenue, how much of that revenue was personally delivered by those two partners, right? Because that could be an issue. If Beth wants to cut and run and she's billed $500,000 of that revenue, then that's a problem, because if Beth leaves, those clients might say, well, okay, now's the time, we've got to look for another CPA firm. Yes, there'll be a handover. Yes, you get to meet all these people. Yes, it's a continuity of trading, blah, blah, blah. But there will be some churn of that revenue. So you've got to look at things like that. So that's...
Carl, one of the things that Franny was wondering about, I'd love to get your take on this, is how you deal with these 50-50 type situations where one wants to leave, one wants to stay.
Yeah.
I mean, the SBA is going to be really hard to structure that, but Beth wants most of her money up front.
Yeah, you've read my mind. So that comes down to point two, which is the deal structure. So I think there's three deal structures that can potentially work on this deal. I think the first thing, John, you alluded to it, could it be an SBA 7A deal where Beth completely checks out and Ken stays on a 1099? That's technically only really allowed for 1 year. But I've seen lots of cases where that contract just gets rolled over, and the SBA just kind of look the other way. So that's possibly a solution. That's not what I would do, by the way. The second option, I think potentially could be a 50-50 deal, where you buy Beth out, you partner with Ken, and then you're buying 50% of the equity for, say, $900,000, which could be, you'd probably need 20% down. So you'd need the same amount of equity to do that deal as you would to do the full 7A, by the way. You'd only need 10% on the 7A loan, which would be 180. You'd need 20% on a 50-50 deal, which would be 180. And then you could get a matched cash flow lend, which is done SBA, and then they wouldn't care who stays and who doesn't. That could be an option. But the problem with something like that is, like, why doesn't Ken, if Ken wants to stay, why isn't he buying out Beth, right? And I'll tell you why. If you're a partner in a business already and you want to buy out your other partner, you can do it with the SBA on a 7A loan with zero equity cash in the deal. You don't need to put any equity into the deal if you're already a partner. The SBA will take your existing shares as your skin in the game. So for Ken to turn around and say, look, let's do a deal on a 7A loan. There's no financial risk to me by doing it. I can't believe that's not happened. So that then tells me, is he looking for cash out? Is he looking to exit the business and stay? Does he want some money? Otherwise, I think he'd be buying the other side out. So that's something to consider. But for me, I would do an annuity deal on. So my two offers would either be the SBA or the 50-50 as offer one. And my parallel offer at the same time would be, look, this isn't worth $3 million. Firms like this are worth on average or 1x of revenue. We've been to the bank. The SBA wouldn't do this deal at $3 million. They just wouldn't. They tap out at $2 million on this deal, in my opinion, as would a normal cash flow lender. Any investor that you'd want to get for the closing payment, whether it's me or Kings of Deals or whether it's any other angel investor or family office in the country, they're not going to pay more than $2 million on a pro rata basis. So if 3 million is the magic number for her, if it's an ego number, as I call it, could you not do a 10-year annuity deal at $300,000 a year? So that's where I'm at with valuation. I'm more concerned about the production of those two people. If they are massively part of the production, I think you'd need to make some adjustments and maybe have an earn-out in place. Again, that would kind of kill an SBA 7A loan. You're going to get really creative with warrants and all those different things. So I do like the deal. I think wealth management is definitely a bolt-on or a way to scale that up. But I would be angling more to an annuity deal on it.
Okay, don't see Zafrina on this call. I thought you were going to be, but that's fine.
Yes, I'm here.
Well, you had there. I don't see you on the list.
Hey, happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Glad you're here, Zafrina. I didn't see you on the list. I usually go to the bottom for Zed, but I guess you're tucked away somewhere else. So yeah, I'd love to get your take on Carl's amends and any questions you might have.
Okay, yes. Thank you, John. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. One of the reasons I like that deal is because of the wealth management and the benefit plan. I am a licensed investment advisor, but most of my wealth management plan and financial planning, I had it outsourced. So that would help me bring those assets back in. 80% to 90% is actually monthly recurring. So all the things are recurring and they get paid at the beginning of the month. So they don't have any AR, that's why. What I like, one of the things about that is, what I did was I've been speaking with them, which has been very interesting. At the last event in Abraham, I heard Carl said he did 2 offers. So what I did was I gave them an offer with 2. So I gave them one offer as an annuity deal at 2.6. So the way I put it is 2508 or 25.10. And then I gave them another offer of an SBA deal with 21788 to 9.28 with a 30% seller finance. So when I did that, it was funny because the broker called me and said, I'm just curious, how did you get your numbers from? I'm not questioning it, but how did you get it? So I said, we have a formula we use, and that's what it tells us. So that's why. So I guess having the 0.0 whatever kind of threw him out. So anyway, I spoke with them, and strangely enough, one of the owners that wanted the SBA deal is now looking to do an annuity as well. So hopefully they come back with me with some answers. Because 1, she's looking at, she want to close before the end of the year. 2, she's looking at the tax liability if she does. And 3, with the other seller wanting to stay in the business and SBA would have them out. So that I kind of favorably in that case. So I'm waiting for them.
I love that. I love that. So one other thing just to mention in this. Now, if you did this as a bolt-on acquisition to your existing company, right? The SBA would not make you put in the 10%. Let me tell you why. The SBA has a specific type of loan for existing business owners. And if you're doing what they call an expansion acquisition, right? They use your existing company as what they call other uses of cash, right? I've never done this, but a lot of my students in CEO have done it. So when you're doing bolt-ons with the SBA, you don't need to put the 10% in. It's an 80-20 deal structure. So 80% SBA financing, 20% seller notes. So if you did have to go down the SBA route, bear that in mind. And what you can do with SBA is, as I said, you can have this rolling 1099 agreement with the gentleman. I'm not a lawyer. Your lawyer will tell you that's not allowed, but it happens, right? I've seen it happen tons and tons of times, and I've done it myself in an SBA deal. And the guy's in his third 1-year contract, and nobody knows any different. But I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not, trying to pretend I am. The other thing that you can do as well with an SBA deal is you can manufacture both an earnout and a retained piece of seller ownership. The earnout is in that 1 year 1099 contract, you can put a bonus structure in there, which will allow for a percentage of revenue or a percentage of STE above a certain level. And then I don't know if you remember the partnership and the equity training I did back in July when I was in Florida, and I talked about something called a warrant. So a warrant is like a share option where it's a piece of paper between you and the owner that if you sell the business in the future at a certain level, they can have a little piece of that ownership. And those documents don't form part of the deal. It's called the deal Bible. Those documents don't form part of the deal Bible that is all signed off by the SBA. So there's a lot of kind of things you can do with SBA loans now where you can get around all these things. But I definitely agree with you that an annuity deal is the way to go on this.
We got new So sorry.
And go ahead. So Kyle, I requested a 30% seller financing. I'm going to get 100% because of my business. I've already been pre-approved for the SBA. But because I wanted her to have some skin in the game, I said 30% over 10 years, just that she can have something to go with and have a guarantee for $2 million revenue for the next 2 years. So that's how I kind of structure.
Perfect.
You asked a question on production. They do have managers, and according to the CPA, right now about 20% of the clients she sees directly. The others being managed by the accounting manager and the tax manager.
Okay, I would ask for a 6-month handover with her, and I'd make sure that all of her clients you are personally introduced to and those relationships are transferred. That would be a requirement. I'd build that into the deal. I'm doing that at the moment on a deal where the owner is very, very much the brand. But I think if you do that and you can get an annuity deal away, this is a really, really good deal. It's a great deal anyway. It's just if you can fix the production issue and you can get an annuity deal on this is a phenomenal acquisition for you. And I still think it works as a 7A loan if you do it as a bolt-on, because then you don't need any capital. You can just do the deal. And like you said, you've already been approved. So it's phenomenal that the power of deal making is going into a negotiation with different options, right? And this 2-offer strategy that we've talked about a lot, if you got the funding lined up for both of those, you're in a phenomenal position when it comes to negotiation. So, but you've done deals before. You're a master at this now. I call you the queen of the annuity deal because you've done one before. You know how to do it. I remember when we talked about it, you said, they'll never go for an annuity deal. They did. Now you're like, I'm going into every deal as an annuity deal. And that confidence you have will breed into the deal and into the seller. So,
hey, the train master's got to jump in here. We're almost 45 minutes into the call. We've done one deal. We still have 45 minutes to do 2 more. So
it's a great deal.
But I know it's fantastic. I had a great chat with Safrina about it. I think this is in the bag. I think she's going to own this company.
Hey, can we get 30 seconds each from Dave Vario and Brittany Farrell, because they're both CPA ninjas.
I would love to do that, but let's keep it to 30 seconds so we got at least some runway for deals 2 and 3. Let's start with Brittany. Love to hear from you.
I love this business. I would do it every day of the week.
I thought you would.
I'm like salivating. I'm like, I need to bribe Sabrina, like cut me in on this. But no, especially with her wealth management too. That's the amazing part. Not only is she a CPA, but she's already got the credentials with the wealth management. So she's going to bring that level of comfort to the buyers too, to say, hey, look, we're going to be able to make sure that your clients have no loss of continuity here because I've got all these credentials. And yeah, I love that she's got the annuity deal. Just amazing. Love it. Way to go, Zafrina.
Thanks, Brittany. Let's hear from David Vario.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's it's a fantastic deal. I would jump all over it, especially with the annuity deal. It's poised to really add some growth. So fantastic job.
seriously, right? If you can do an annuity deal on this is a golden buzzer deal. This is a golden buzzer deal for an annuity, in my opinion. So phenomenal.
I know what I need on this call. I need bumper music. Anybody in the radio business? I need bumper music here.
Oh, we used to own a radio business. We could have had a jingle for
I'll call Paul up and ask him he's got some bumper music for me. No, that's a great deal, Sabrina.
Yeah, great job.
Thank you.
So for all the newbies on the call, that's what a stellar deal looks like. That's what an absolutely brilliant deal looks like. It's in your way, the numbers check out, and just two little things to think about.